If 2 wrongs don't make a right, try 3. Lawrence J. Peter.
You're listening to Writing Roots, brought to you by Aspen House Publishing.
Welcome to Writing Roots. I'm Lee Hull.
And I'm Lee Esses.
Today's episode is about a very, very important rule in writing.
A very, very, very important rule in writing.
Oh, yes, of course. Very, very, very.
We are talking about the rule of 3 today. And this is great for humor, like we mentioned last episode, and it's also great for establishing a theme, a motif, something to get a point across in your story.
If you want it to really have an impact in the story, you have to have mentioned it at least 3 times, whatever it is.
The first time something happens, it happens. We get it. The second time something happens, the reader is wondering what you're doing with it. It's like, okay, we've revisited this concept in some way. Why? Using a concept 3 times in a row reinforces a theme, whatever that theme is. One of the examples that comes to mind is Beethoven's 5th Symphony. That is the famous dun-dun-dun-dun. That symphony, as I recall, has that theme happen 3 times throughout the symphony. Once at the beginning, that's how the whole thing opens. It's big, it's grandiose, it's epic. Once in the middle, after it gets light, and then it re-drops it in, and then goes light again. And then once at the very end. So the first time it happens, okay, we're kind of getting a feel for the theme. The second time it happens, we're like, okay, I remember this. This is recalling that memory. And then the third time, it's a theme. This is what this whole symphony is about. And if it happened a 4th time, it would be annoying.
When it comes to using something 3 times, it's not only you have to use everything in your story just 3 times. We're talking about big themes that recur. A really good representation of the use of 3 is generally how many times a hero faces the villain in a story. It's about 3 times that they face them head on. They usually start off the story facing the villain somehow and failing. They usually face the villain near the end of part 2 and fail. And then they face the villain again at the end and finally win. Obviously, this is not a set concept, but it is a theme that uses the use of 3.
I think 3 is an interesting number because it's easy to remember. A lot of myths and fairy tales and epic stories use the number 3. You have the 3 Musketeers, but you also have the 3 Little Pigs, where it's house 1, house 2, house 3. And it's an escalation between each one.
It's not even just 3 people or 3 things, but it's 3 ideas: life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness.
Another example is Charles Dickens' A Christmas Carol, where he's visited by the ghost of Christmas past, and then the ghost of Christmas presents, and then the ghost of Christmas future. You're escalating with each step.
Technically, there were 4 ghosts.
Marley's?
Yes.
Not the point right now. But you have these 3 ghosts that come to teach him a lesson, and it changes every time. It starts almost sweet in the past, and then the reality, the cold reality of what's going on, and then very dark in the 3rd for Christmas future.
3 isn't always people either. It's not always the 3 Musketeers or the 3 ghosts or the 3 Little Pigs, but it's ideas and concepts that come in a set of 3. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Stop, drop, and roll. These are things that are easy to remember because 3. There are 3 of them. There's something about the human brain that really likes 3.
I think it was Brian Clark who said, if you want something to stick in someone's head, put it in a sequence of 3. I believe the Marine Corps actually experimented with getting people to remember simple concepts. In a life-threatening situation, having 2 things to remember is actually harder than having 3 things to remember because you have that rhythm with the 3. When you have the stop, drop, roll, you even have the same vowel in the middle of it, and it's very easy to teach kindergartners When I was in kindergarten, I was convinced that being lit on fire was going to be like a major issue in my life. That and quicksand. Those were like the big threats that threatened kindergarten me. But this concept not only gets people to remember it, but it forces you as an author to boil it down to what's really important.
So the use of 3 isn't a modern thing. This is something that goes back to ancient times. In Greek mythology, you have the 3 main gods, Zeus, Poseidon, and Hades. The god of the sky, the god of the water, and the god of the underworld. In Christian beliefs, 3 is also another very important number. You have Christ that rose in 3 days.
Father, Son, Holy Spirit.
Exactly. In Roman mythology, there were 3 fates. And then, of course, everybody's favorite example, Cerberus, the 3-headed dog.
Yay! Cerberus, the word actually translates to spotted. Hades literally named his dog Spot.
Great. I love it. So this is a very, very common theme throughout time to have 3. And also, if you think about it, for a very long time, and even currently, the 3-act structure is dominant in storytelling.
Absolutely. That's most of what you're going to see in movies. It's most of what you're going to see in my writing. Most of what you're going to see in a lot of modern writing is the 3-act structure. Even the number 3 is useful in decision making in my family. So if we have either 2 or 3 people going out to lunch together, one person posits 3 different locations, and then the other person, if there's one other person, picks from those 3, and then it's fair. And if there are 2 other people, each of them eliminates 1. So then everybody has a say in where we go, and nobody gets to complain about it. I have 2 siblings, and this was used a lot in my childhood.
So hopefully this episode helped you realize the importance of using 3. This is a little bit more difficult for pantsers because we don't generally plan out a lot, but it is something that they should at least try to do and try to consider.
You, as an author, are going to use the rule of 3 when setting up what I call footholds in your story, something that you're going to spring from later. Especially if you're doing this escalating 3 structure that you see a lot. You establish something, and then when you reference it again, you're stacking on top of it. You'll see that in Douglas Adams in the way he tells jokes. Is the first time you say something, okay, that's funny. And then when he references it later, it's extra funny. And then by the 3rd time he references it, that's the big joke that he's built throughout the entire book. When you as an author are trying to get a concept across to your readers, if you build it throughout the book instead of making it a moral of the story at the end, it sounds far less preachy and far more engaging to the story and memorable to the readers.
So 3 is useful in writing humor, it's useful in writing the themes of your story, it's useful in the whole structure of your story. The use of 3 is one of the building blocks of writing, really.
Absolutely.
So hopefully you can take some of this episode, use it in your writing, recognize when you can use something 3 times to make it that much more potent.
Write selfishly.
Write selfishly.
Write selfishly.
If you have a question or comment for our hosts or a topic you'd like us to cover, send us an email at writingroots@aspenhousepublishing.com or find us on Facebook by searching for Aspen House Publishing.